America. Now, Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley claims he does not have the power to ban pro-Palestinian protests on Armistice Day. Apparently, a ban can only be introduced if intelligence suggests a serious threat of disorder. This comes as Veterans Affairs Minister Johnny Mercer has urged ex-service personnel to not counter protest against those activists in favour of, stopping the war in Gaza. Joining me now to talk about this and some of today's other big stories is former Defence Minister and Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning to you.
Thank you for that. Do you believe Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Chief, when he says he just doesn't have the power to ban this protest?
Well, certainly that might be the case now, but as the Veterans Minister, Johnny Mercer, is saying, others are wanting to come up and participate in an important event that takes place once a year. This is, I think, worth stressing what Remembrance Day is all about, when the entire nation comes together in every corner of our country to say thank you to past service personnel for what they've done, the sacrifices and freedoms that we now enjoy. It is an apolitical event. It's and I think it would be highly inappropriate for any large-scale demonstrations to then take place. This doesn't mean that we ban these demonstrations. It simply means that they are moved to a different day. And that's the question that I'd like to put to organisers. You know, are you likely to win over any more public opinion to your cause, which you may seem absolutely right, if you clash in this way with something that's so important to Britain? It will also put a strain, I think, on public order policing too. The piece that I'm concerned about is that there are going to be thousands, potentially tens of thousands. And can any organizer really guarantee that that will be peaceful, that everybody is there to act in an orderly way? You cannot vouch for everyone. And there will be some, we know, that will want to stoke hatred, will want to trigger unrest, will want to elevate those tensions to pursue a far more aggressive extremist agenda. And we're already seeing potentially, and this might change Sir Mark's mind, that there are those that will increase in radicalization, will use this as a recruitment sergeant in that sense, and that may see the Met Police change their minds. I do believe that hold the rally, by all means, but do this on a different day.
Well, I mean, I was thinking, given that it's not actually due to go past the Cenotaph or go anywhere near Whitehall, it's going to be in Hyde Park, it's going to go down to the US Embassy, that actually, is there a risk? Is it an issue? Only in the sense that some people might decide to leave and go to the Cenotaph to cause problems. We know, we're told football hooligans, and veterans, and others, and possibly far-right organisations might go to Whitehall to protect the Cenotaph. And again, although I don't agree with a lot of those people, I agree with the right and the urge to want to protect that memorial. But I'm not genuinely a fan of banning protests as long as they are peaceful. But there is a concern quite separate from the Armistice Day date about these protests actually being very intimidating. I don't think someone should be banned because someone else is offended. But I think the fact that there will be many, 250,000 Jews in this country, and many of them say, very, very understandably, that they feel very intimidated by these protests. They feel that they are about destroying, for lots of them, some of the placards, and they're about destroying Israel. They're saying Israel doesn't have a right to defend itself. Israel doesn't have a right to exist even. Jewish people don't have a right to exist. That's pretty much what Hamas stands for. When people are shouting from the river to the sea, that's what that slogan is about. Is that an argument to ban those protests?
You make such a powerful point here, because you had the Israeli ambassador here in London saying that many Jewish people now feel more scared than Israelis back at home because of that intimidation as well. But to underline the point that such large demonstrations, the peaceful organisers can't really vouch for everybody. There was a large demonstration last week, and a group peeled off and marched towards the Egyptian embassy. These were parts of the Muslim Brotherhood organisation. They were shouting jihad. And as you touched on, this next rally is going to the US Embassy. Where might it go to next? People will take advantage of that. That's what they do. And you're absolutely right to underline the right, the freedoms that we have in this country to hold those rallies. But we have to be sensible about this. And that's why we're not saying ban them. We're simply saying that this is an extraordinary day in the British calendar where we say thank you for the past service. Please, let's actually keep that focus on that day, and then we can then allow those demonstrations to take place on a different day. But this is also, if I may, got caught up in the word ceasefire. And I think it's really important that we distinguish between what is a ceasefire and what is a humanitarian pause, the latter of which I'm very much in favor for, because a ceasefire would actually freeze the status quo. It would mean Hamas would be empowered. And I don't believe anybody should be supporting Hamas. They've lost any right to represent Palestinians. And I'm afraid the ceasefire will actually empower them in that sense. It would keep them in charge. So have that humanitarian support. On the flip side, I would also say, this may be unpopular, but through a military lens, this is not the way to invade the Gaza Strip. It's an unwise, indeed dangerous utility of their superior military might. It's without a clear strategy. It won't destroy the ideology. And if there is a humanitarian pause, it might give an opportunity for Israel to listen to other nations, including the United States. Biden said this, don't make our mistakes that we made after 9/11.
Benjamin Netanyahu is not down, in Gaza City in the tunnels fighting Hamas terrorists himself. He's got plenty of time. We know that he's talking to the Americans, every day. Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, still doing the rounds, desperately trying to... people say keeping the peace. He's basically, obviously, sending a message privately. Don't get involved. Do not escalate this into a Middle East, a whole conflict. This is the thing. If Israel are not going to try to destroy Hamas, what are they allowed to do? Because we were quite happy about destroying Al-Qaeda. When Al-Qaeda attacked the Twin Towers, we were quite happy. The entire world was like, yeah, absolutely. Taliban were allowing Al-Qaeda to act with impunity in Afghanistan. We went in. Let's take on ISIS in Iraq and Syria. I'm sorry. As far as I'm concerned, Israel have every right to do what is necessary to get rid of this Hamas. And frankly, you're not going to destroy the ideology by allowing Hamas to continue to exist.
I'm sorry, you've misinterpreted me completely. I didn't say do not destroy Hamas. Hamas needs to be destroyed.
Right now.
I'm saying through a military lens, this is not the way to do it.
How
because there's no clarity. Well, if you give me a second and to allow me to finish my sentence, the first thing is to step back and say this is not Israel's challenge alone. What sits behind Hamas? You've got the Muslim Brotherhood and you've got Iran. Iran is funding Hamas. It's funding the Houthis and it's funding Hezbollah as well. And this will continue. You will get Hamas 2.0 unless there is something to challenge Iran's proxy influence across the area. And you work with the Arab nations to provide a temporary government in charge into random parts of the country. I'd have done it from a zoned approach from the Rafah crossing.
But they didn't do that. They waited weeks before they've done that. They were in Gaza City today, we understand. The massacre in Israel was a month ago.
It doesn't matter whether it was a month ago or 6 months ago. If you destroy the fighters and a Hamas 2.0 comes about, if the funding is still there, the problem continues and history repeats itself. I'm not saying you don't send the tanks in. I'm saying at the moment there is no clarity for the Palestinians themselves to recognize, OK, so you're going to defeat Hamas, what comes next? And until you answer that question, I'm afraid that these attacks that are taking place in the manner that they're doing with the scale of collateral damage is actually alienating the very Arab countries that have signed the Abrahamic Accords that want to actually assist. And they are now being alienated because of the character of conduct of the war that's taking place at the moment.
But again,
I'm saying absolutely it will require a form of invasion.
We've got to keep all the Arab nations happy. Now, the reality is the Arab nations, the ones that have signed accords with Israel to normalise relations, they're not backed by their people. They know perfectly well that the average person, average man, let's face it, it's all men in the street, in those Arab nations, they want the destruction of Israel and they want the Jewish people to cease to exist.
I don't agree with that at all. I do not agree with that at all.
Yes,
I do not agree with that at all. I'm sorry, but you are simplifying a very complex and nuanced situation here. There are countries now, particularly Egypt and Jordan and so forth, that decades ago recognized Israel's right to exist. The
leadership recognises and supports Israel's right to exist. The general population do not. It's a load of. I mean, I'm sorry, it's just nonsense. They do not. I just find it extraordinary. Constantly, whatever Israel does, it's like, well, it's not good enough. The reality is, here's the message to Hamas and to the people of Gaza, Palestine. If you want to support Hamas, you don't want to rise up against Hamas, then I'm sorry, and you're going to be allowed to be used by Hamas as human shields. Then I'm really, really sorry, but your children are going to die. It's not what Israel wants. It's not what
I'm not sure.
armchair generals like me want.
I'm trying to follow.
But tough. But tough.
I'm trying
at
to
the
follow
end
you.
of the day, what is Israel supposed to do to defend their people? You cannot live as a nation state in Israel knowing that you've got terrorists in tunnels a few miles away who will do this again day after day after day. They have to be killed.
Right. I've just written, I'm not able to do it justice in the seconds that you're giving me, because once you keep interrupting me, I'm saying absolutely use kinetic force. You're going to have to destroy Hamas. You're going to have to remove them. But unless there's clarity on what comes next, you will not win over the hearts and minds of the Palestinians. And yes, you may be right that there are individuals or even larger communities across the Arab world that might not agree with Israel's right to exist, but they're not in charge. And for decades now, Egypt and Jordan have done so, and now other countries, including the UAE, including Bahrain, and almost Saudi Arabia was about to sign up as well, in recognizing a direction of travel which I think would be welcomed by most people. That is the starting point from where you need to go on. I've just written a big piece on Politico, which actually spells out the military invasion that I would have recommended, which uses kinetic force, which kills the bad people, the terrorists and so forth. But it also gives it in a logical order that then allows areas of the Gaza Strip to be handed over to a coalition of Arab nations that then take forward the responsibility of governance and of security once Hamas has been destroyed.
I will take a look. I'll urge other people to do so as well. Tobias Ellwood, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much.